So Mark Hehl Associates, he's the president of that company. So a little bit about Mark. Basically, he successfully set up and improved operations at various countries. So he's touched quite a few of them. If I read the list, we'd probably be here for a half hour, so I won't. Basically, the projects he's been involved with have resulted in significant reductions in operating costs, which is huge, as we know. That's partly why we're here, to learn about that type of stuff, along with improved schedule performance, service levels, quality, and quality. And to let you know, as far as some of the recognitions he's gotten so far, this is pretty significant. From the timing suppliers in China, they actually honored him with the award of the Chinese name. Here I am again. Looks like Hehl Kai.
Close.
Pretty close?
Yeah.
Okay, another major I didn't have, as you can tell. Anyhow, so that's quite a distinctive honor, obviously, in China. So congratulations on that, Mark. And as far as the degrees go, electrical engineering from New York Institute of Technology, another degree of management from Polytechnic Institute of New York. And the other thing to think about is he's been a delegate and featured presenter at the 3rd China American Quality Symposium, which was actually held in Shanghai. The other thing I wanted to mention is, in his spare time, he actually helped contribute to be an author of a book. The name of that book is Cases in Globalized and Cultural Appropriate E-Learning. So, without any further ado, enough of me rambling, I'd like to introduce Mark as our speaker for tonight.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I need that microphone. It's distorting anyway. No, my voice carries is one thing. Right, everybody can hear me? Yeah, I didn't think it would be a problem. Oh, it's great to be here, and it's really interesting why this topic. You know, I used to do this a lot. There was a big call for it, and then lately, because outsourcing has kind of slowed, it's still there. What happened is there was other things that other APICS organizations were interested in, like supplier cost reduction, cross-cultural issues, other things. But I was asked to do this, and it's an older presentation, but I did update it. So I'll try to give you the current status of outsourcing, especially in the hot areas, which is Latin America and in East Asia also. Okay, here, how many people have to deal with suppliers or business partners overseas? Most people? Okay. Some of the countries? Some of the regions?
All the regions.
All of them, okay. Yeah, just about everywhere. Everyone else, so you deal with China, Latin America, maybe Eastern Europe, you know, other parts of Asia. Okay, good. And most people are in the product area, not service? So I tailor this properly? In the product area.
Don't worry about it.
Your service, okay. Okay. I won't. Okay, your wife said the same thing. Don't worry about it. Okay, so let's move on about outsourcing. Yeah, what I'm going to speak about is what the current state is now. It's different than what it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the whole world was running to places like China and India, and actually moving from Latin America over there, but it's changing now. We'll talk about the challenging. I want to speak a little bit about hidden costs, because when I first started consulting, a lot of companies would come to me and say, we moved our operations to this low-cost region, and we did calculations, and now we've been there, and we're not saving any money. Why? And you know, one thing, when I was, I don't know if it came out in my bio, but before I decided to become a consultant, I was an executive for the Timex Corporation, and they had been chasing cheap labor way before the rest of the world did. They started in the mid-1980s, and they were real good at it. They knew when they moved operations from one place or the other how to do it right, and how to calculate their costs, because they stayed in business and they were competing with all of these foreign companies that were competing with them, and they were able to, even as an American company, to be price competitive. So they were really good at it. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll talk about success factors. We'll talk a little bit about the revolving door. It's not that bad now, but years ago it was really bad. Okay, there were companies where we would train people. They would set up operations, and then they would have people quit, and they'd have to redo it all over again. It's much better now, but with the world economy, all of a sudden now, growing, you know, I suspect it's going to be an issue again. We'll talk about this important thing, culture. You know, I didn't realize how important that was until I started doing work offshore, and when I started engaging culture, it really worked wonders for me. So that's an important thing, and that's something that, you know, as far as me dealing with different people from all over the world, Americans, we're not one of the best as far as handling cultures and engaging cultures. We're kind of arrogant, and we think our way is the right way, and that gets in our way. In fact, probably Americans, I think they're probably we're the worst. And I have so many clients that I get so frustrated. They make constant errors on and off, and I never planned on it, but now I actually offer cross-cultural training to the regions that I have spent a lot of time in, that I have a lot of knowledge of, and I do provide training. I never wanted to, but so many companies need it, so that's important. We'll talk about due diligence and some of the latest trends. Okay, what I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to be jumping back and forth because some people here have suppliers at offshore locations that you outsource to. Some companies I suspect have joint ventures also, and some other ones actually own companies. So, you know, depending upon what topic I'm on, I'm going to be jumping back and forth, and it'll be obvious to you which one is would be a joint venture and which one would be a supplier. But most of the points make sense for everything. At this point, I usually joke when I speak because of my accent. Okay, you probably don't hear it, but I grew up in Brooklyn, and when I speak in other places like in the South, I usually say things with a strong accent and no one understands me, to joke around, but I can't do it here. You took away my fun, because it probably I sound normal to you.
Just like us.
Yeah, right, just like everybody else, yeah. So, yeah. Okay, but I say stuff, my wife's not from this area, and sometimes, one time I said, that's the law. She said, what, you know what I was talking about? I said, oh, it's the law, because adding on R's. I used to spell agenda, because I pronounced it agender, I put an R on the end. I used to misspell it. It was so bad, yeah. Okay, let's talk about why it's cheaper. Okay, you know, even though now you've probably heard that costs in these low-cost regions are rising, especially in China. China has had significant increases in labor costs. It's still cheaper over there. It's still less expensive for labor, professional labor, hourly workers' labor. It is cheaper in these countries. And what's interesting that's happening is China used to be so much lower than their competitors, like Latin America, like the Philippines, okay, like Korea, like Thailand, and places like Malaysia, that they were so much cheaper. And now it's more or less evening out. There's not much of a difference between a lot of the neighboring countries and even Latin America. But it is still cheaper. You know, the gap is there, it's narrowing, but it's cheaper. Some of the other things, when you go offshore, the overhead is less. It's amazing when I go to these countries, and just about every low-cost region, and just a couple of weeks ago I just made a list of all the countries I've done work in, and it came out to 38. I didn't realize it was that many. And I always see that they have so much less overhead. They have large factories with a small office of office people. They have one supervisor supervising 100 people, and that is a supervisor. The person is the planner, the person is the expediter, the person is the quality assurance manager, okay? And it's also the manufacturing engineer. Also, one person doing all of this. Where if you were in this country, you know, you would have different people doing it. You'd have much more office help, but they don't have that. So the overhead is way down, okay? And so that still makes them, for the right situation, it makes it a smart thing to do. Regulatory and environmental issues, again, they're not as strict, not as complex. That's here, and a lot of times in the countries where they're at, they're just not enforced. You know, they're there, but they're not enforced, so that lowers the cost. Here, these days, you know, companies really can't get away with ignoring them. You know, and if they get caught, it's disastrous. You know, and sometimes it's not just the fines, it's the bad press that hurts them. So that's another thing that is still, even though the labor costs are going up, it's cheaper, that drives it down. The work ethic, especially in Asia, okay, much higher here. People still, it's starting to change, but in China, still typically professionals and workers, 65-hour work week is normal. Okay, even in a country that's more westernized like Taiwan, they still work, you know, long days. Normal is a 9 or a 10-hour day, and every other Saturday they work. You know, it's normal there where it's not normal here. So the work ethic is there. There are many times when I call China and it's 9 o'clock at night there, and I'm making a call trying to just leave a voice message to pick up this email. I'm going to call them to verify it, because that's something you need to do when you're dealing with people that English isn't their first language. And they would pick up the phone at 9 o'clock at night, still in the office working. Okay, so it's amazing. So you got this work ethic that helps. Labor laws, they're not as strict in places. You know, they're starting to enforce them, but in a lot of these third world countries, the labor laws are there, they're not enforced, and there's still, even to this day, with all these social compliance auditing going on, I still find companies where the workers don't realize they're entitled to premium pay for overtime. And it's not time and a half, it's a small premium there too. So the labor laws aren't enforced. Sometimes they're not even paid. They just said you will do the work, and you work as many hours as we tell you, and the workers don't realize that they have rights. And that's one of the things when I do social compliance audits that I check for, that people have been advised, they know that they have rights. And there's also a lot of government incentives. Okay, it's starting to go away, but it's there. There was an article, I think, in today's New York Times indicating that there's a bit of a problem with the alternative energy companies in China, the ones that make photoelectric cells. You read the article? No? But there was an article in today's paper saying that the government is not is starting to pull back, and they're not incentivizing these companies, not helping them. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen with that. But in general, the government incentives are there. Some other reasons why it is, you know, when you source from overseas, if you're able to buy the raw materials, the materials there, that's less expensive. So beside your labor content, your material content is less expensive. And you know, it depends upon, again, the mix, how much that is. But if you have a high material component in whatever product is being made, what happens is the material costs go down. Real estate and rentals, much cheaper. It's cheaper. You know, anyone has seen factories in these countries? How many have been there? Okay, right. Do they look like these type of buildings?
No.
You ever been to northern China in the winter?
Yeah.
Is there heat? No. People wear coats and gloves, yeah. Okay, so the costs are down. They're not insulated buildings, you know, very, very, very rudimentary buildings, you know, unless it's required for what they're making. You won't find air conditioning. You know, I was at a factory once in northern China. I think it was so far north we were almost in Russia, and I froze to death. You know, I wasn't planning on going there, didn't have it right, and I only had one room that I had to keep coming back to. My feet were numb, and these people were jumping up and down trying to make product. In fact, I have to tell you a funny story. I was at the same place. We were at almost a brand new hotel in this new region in northern China that was starting to industrialize. And the room I was in was heated very nicely. In fact, it was too hot, okay, but the rest of the building was not heated. Brand new hotel. So we go having breakfast, you have to put coats on and hats to eat because it's freezing there. And we go to the station, and there's a poor guy there, you know, making eggs. So you would order what you want. He has a bowl with chopsticks, and the guy's shaking, and he's trying to whip the eggs, to make scrambled eggs, and he's shaking, and the eggs are falling. They're all over the floor. He couldn't even hold the bowl still because it was so cold. I wish I could have taken a picture of that. Okay, let's move on. So real estate, the currency, again, China still is holding back the value of their currency to make it to stack the deck in their favor. They let up a little bit lately because the state of the world economy, they stopped doing it. They will eventually let up again, but still now they're stacking the deck in their favor. And also, because labor is cheap, although it's changing, there's low capital investment. You really don't need a lot of automation. Back 10 years ago, when direct factory labor, unskilled labor was running 60, 70 cents an hour fully loaded in China, you wouldn't even think about automating because your payback was 20 years. Most companies, 2-3 years, if you don't get a payback, you don't do it. So, it's starting to change a little bit. Some companies are realizing that they need to automate, but in general, if you're in a low labor area, you don't have that investment of automation the same as you would here. So that's some of the things that are changing it. Some of the challenges that being involved in this all these years since I've been a consultant, since 2002 I think I started, and prior to that with my time at Timex, spending a lot of time in offshore locations, there's a number of challenges. One is productivity. Basically in a offshore low-cost region, the level of sophistication isn't there and the productivity isn't there, and it takes a little longer to get it up, and a lot of times I find that you just can't get it up to the same level as it was from where you move the work from. Quality, there's still quality issues. It's getting better, but a lot of companies, are still struggling with poor quality, and we're going to get into some of the other ramifications of that and how that drives costs up. The service is not as good. On-time delivery. In fact, when I started doing consulting in this area back 10, 12 years ago, what I would ask people, what's the biggest problem? And they would say, well, if we're going to offshore locations, it's probably quality, okay? And then a few years after that, it started to move, and when people were saying, well, quality's getting better now, just getting product on time. And part of that is even a cultural issue that you don't even get advance notice of it. And that has to do with the culture in a lot of these third world countries, why you're not even notified. So all of these surprises and on-time delivery. The other thing is, if you're dealing with Asia, it's the time zone. Okay, it's a little before 7 now. They're just in China. I think it's a little before 8 now. They're starting to go to work now. Okay, and everybody's home now, so it's difficult to call. And a lot of times you just have to spend a lot of time at night that we'll talk about. So dealing with the time zones and differences, and if there's a problem at 2 o'clock in the morning, you really don't want to be called and woken up. Lately, over the past 8 or 9 years, I don't give anybody my home phone number anymore. They have my cell number, and my cell phone sleeps when I do. And I get it when I wake up in the morning, because I've had calls, even when I wasn't there. My wife gets woken up, and she's not happy with that. Okay? All right, some of the other things, the challenges is the culture. There's different cultures. There's constant challenges and problems with this. I have a one-day training program on culture. In fact, I'm going to do it for APICS in South Africa in a few months. That really talks about that, and about 30% of it is instances where I've seen companies lose money and disasters happening just because of not understanding and engaging the culture. That's how important it is. We're going to talk a little bit about that, a little more about that later. Political climate, places like China, most of the things that are happening there are not publicized, but it happens constantly. There's constant uprisings, there's problems with pollution, where it's causing problems, where people are getting kicked out of their homes because of industrialization, human rights violations, all kind of things. Political corruption that is causing big issues. The big divide in China between rich and poor. That's another one there. So all of these uprisings are happening in a lot of these countries that aren't that stable. Some are better than others. And you have to deal with the risk there of having a problem and really getting yourself into a lot of trouble if there's a problem. You know, fortunately, Latin America is pretty quiet these days. There's not too much going on in most of the countries. That used to be a problem. China still is an issue, and there's a few other countries that are happening. Even there's a lot of things happening lately in India that never did happen, that all of a sudden now I'm starting to see. And again, general communication issues besides the time zone, communicating with people where English isn't their first language, which is a problem. The need to constantly communicate both by emails and phone calls constantly to make sure the message is received and that action is going to happen. Okay, another challenge is, I mentioned before that skilled and technical labor, a while back that was a big issue. Okay, when I was at Timex, we had a situation, we were moving the product qualification testing from Connecticut to China, and we would get engineers in there to do the various testing to qualify our products, and we would get somebody in, and again, Timex was the premier company. Everybody wanted to work there. We would hire an engineer, and within 6 months, sometimes even a year at most, they would all quit. They would go somewhere else. We'd have to rehire people. And I had moved a guy that was ready to retire there. He was supposed to spend 1.5 years there. I couldn't get him out of there. It took me 7 years to get him out because he kept having to retrain people. Okay, it is better now, but you know, I think it's going to come back again. India, back when all these IT companies were moving software development to India, some of the reports that I got, as much as 80% of people that would leave. That means 4 out of 5 people that were working today, a year from now, that they would not be there. When I was at Timex, we had a non-deliverable software development organization in India. They were doing a project for me, and the project actually never got finished because of turnover. What was happening is, even to keep it going, we had to back up people 3 deep. We have a senior person, an intermediate person, and a junior person, because we knew the senior person in 6 months, or a little more than that, would leave, and we'd have to just keep moving up, and we'd bring another person in. And it was constant. And it was really, it's hard enough to get any software development project to come in on time. And with that, you know, the one thing we just gave up. You know, and I just, something that I needed for my group, we never we never were able to develop that, and it really caused an issue. I don't want to say what it is because, you know, Timex is still one of my clients. I want to keep them. Okay, that's why. But yeah, so again, there's a recent improvement. I think it's going to come back. It won't be as bad as that, but it's there. And the other thing is, companies, they still do it. They don't differentiate between, this one I really have a problem with, and I try to convince people, between price and cost. They get a low purchase order price, and they jump at it. To go offshore, we can get it so many cheaper, and they don't look at the other items that are the cost. And there's one large Fortune 100 company, a client of mine, in New Jersey, in this state, that every time I tell them and every time I do a project, they still do that. They get infatuated by a low price. They don't look at the cost. They get in trouble, call me in, and usually the last minute to bail them out. And it's expensive for them. It's all the other costs plus what they have to pay me. Once they called me, they wanted me the next day or 2 days to get on a plane and go to, I think, Malaysia. It was. And I looked at price tickets, because it was a busy time of year. $11,000 is the cheapest ticket for a business class ticket. I called them, I said, you still want me to go? It's expensive, you know, just to get me on a plane. Forget about what you're going to pay there. And they says, yeah, go. And I went, you know, I went, and they questioned it after I sent it in. I says, I warned you about it, okay?
I was thinking a lot more than $11 grand.
What?
You're probably saving a hell of a lot more than 11 grand.
A couple projects I helped them, a couple it was beyond help, yeah. One actually got canceled, yeah. So, yes?
I don't understand exactly what you're talking about. Don't people know what price and cost is?
No.
You would think they know, but a lot of, no, the answer is no. They look at the purchase order
Absolutely
price.
not.
Yeah, and they say it's cheaper, it's 30% less, but they don't realize all the other incidental costs to the company. And they don't calculate it, and a lot of times it's buried in the overhead, it's hard to pull out. But they don't even consider it. They just jump blind, and it's amazing. And this is a Fortune 100 company in New Jersey. It constantly does it, yeah.
This is a good definition. Price, looking at the amount that is less outlaid in order to purchase the item versus the amount that has to be outlaid in order to make that reduction happen.
The price is the purchase order price. How I define it.
How much you're paying?
It's what you pay the supplier. You have supplier A, you're paying $100
Yeah.
per item or, okay? You find another offshore supplier, you're paying $70. Okay, so the price is $70, $30 less, 30% reduction, okay? But it's not the total cost to the company.
Right, because in order to make that happen, there needs to be certain outlays.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to it, yeah.
Okay.
I have a whole list.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute or two, and I'll get to it. Okay, here's some of the things that I find organizations tend to, you can shut that off, yeah. Good. That organizations fail to consider or they underestimate it. And they're still doing it to this day. You know, I don't do as much work in this area as I used to, but I'm still seeing. First of all is the efficiency drop. They think they move stuff within North America, and they had a little drop, and in a few months they got efficiency up to what it was. When you go offshore, sometimes it takes much longer, and you don't get the efficiency. In fact, at Timex, the rule we used was a year and a half, and we get efficiency to about 85% of what it was before. Okay, we never considered we would get it back to the same amount unless it got very mature. And for a while, Timex every few years was going somewhere else. Okay, and they do it of all the companies. They actually do it the best. Another one is scrap and rework rise. That usually goes up in companies. I've been at companies where they had high scrap and rework, and they didn't think anything was wrong with that. Okay, they really thought it was normal. You know, we just if we have to redo it, we redo it. And it's not manufacturing. There's in administrative processes, there's rework. You know, if something is done, if work is handed off to somebody else, it's not done right, it's got to be returned to get it done again. That is also there. So the scrap and rework wise. The learning curve is much longer. You know, even if you have people there supporting them, you're dealing through interpreters, to translators. People don't have a good command of English, so the learning curve takes much longer. This is another one. This eats people's cake constantly. So many companies lose all their savings because they don't realize that because things are late, that you have to put it on an airplane. You plan on surface shipment, and all of a sudden you get into trouble. I've had clients where they would plan for maybe 3 or 4 expedited shipments a year, and in the first month they would use that up. And they were constantly putting things on airplanes because they had to get stuff here in time. They couldn't put off their customers.